humbled to introduce this individual as a returning guest. The notion that he was on the pod once and decided to come back to talk a little bit more. We must be doing something right over here. He pumps out New York Times bestsellers like Jalen Brunson pumps out 40-point games. His latest instant classic is on bookshelves now. I am holding it in my hand, but you could also see it on your screen. Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers, the one and only Ian O'Connor. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, Jonathan. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Listen, man. We were saying a little bit before the pod. Me and Andrew only got a copy of the book within the last few days. And I don't know if you know, I'm also a teacher in my side hustle, as it were. And so this is the first week of school here in New York City. I should be doing all sorts of things related to the classrooms that I teach in. And yet I can't get my nose out of this thing because, as you are accustomed to doing, you write these books that just engross you from page one. So I want to start here, because you wrote in your forward, or your prelude, I guess I should say, that you were going to write a different book. Maybe we can get to that later. And then Aaron Rodgers got traded to the Jets, and you said, "Well, this is my hometown. This is the guy. This is the story." Can you share a little bit more about what inspired you to write this book at this time?
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks so much. I think that, I was all set to do a LeBron James biography, unauthorized. And I actually got a threatening legal letter or email back from one of his people about it. And that was interesting, and actually made me more determined to do it and less determined to trade LeBron for Aaron Rodgers.
Have you had that framed, that letter?
It was just a legal, it was, if there's any new reporting, you had better vet it, and we need to have a chance to respond to it. And if not, we'll hold you legally accountable. And so it was interesting, because I had written a rather polite, cordial note about my intentions with the book, which always are to be fair to the subject. And I think I've been exceedingly fair with my subjects. And so in any event, I could double back to that at some point. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers gets traded into my backyard. I always wanted to do a Packers book at some point in my career, because Vince Lombardi coached my high school, and that was the only place he had ever been a head coach before the Packers, which is an amazing thing. But he made St. Cecilia's in Englewood, New Jersey, the #1 high school football team in the country. Not surprising. And Lombardi lived basically on my street, 8 houses away from me. And so Aaron, a first ballot Hall of Famer as a Packer, being traded to New York at the end of his career, not desperate, but really could use that second ring for his legacy. And if he wins one for the New York Jets, that's going to be Mark Messier winning one for the New York Rangers in '94 times 5 or times 10. It's just because the NFL is a lot bigger than the NHL, and also the social media age and the controversies that have followed Rodgers late in his career and trying to pull this off. He'll turn 41 in December. So you could imagine what that story would feel like. It would be, I think, the biggest New York sports story of my lifetime. But after watching the Jets defense against the 49ers, I'm not sure that's a very plausible scenario right now. I think that my takeaway from the Jets opener in San Francisco is that the Knicks have a lot better chance to end their 51-year championship drought than the Jets do of ending their 55-year championship drought. So we'll see how it unfolds as we go forward.
But you make a compelling case at the start of the book, and I'm not even getting into the contents of it yet, about why this would be the biggest story in New York sports, arguably in that long. And this gets me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is that I don't know how you do. I mean, I don't even know if you know how you do it. I'd love to hear more. You find these subjects and you write the authoritative, like definitive sports book on these people. And yet you read your books and you come out of them feeling like you know these individuals as people. far more than just sports figures, more than members of your own family. So when you said that, it would be this, like the biggest story in however long, how much of that for you is about the Rodgers, the sports angle of it, and how much of you for that is that about Rodgers, the person?
Yeah, a lot of it is a good question. A lot of it is about the person. And I always feel like I'm writing about a human being, not a quarterback or a shooting guard or a center fielder, whatever it might be, or a head coach. It really is about the human being. And I had a conversation with Aaron Rodgers really about that in his backyard in Malibu on the Pacific Ocean, which was the nicest backyard setting I've ever had for an interview. And that was in February. And I said, as you know, he's estranged from his family and has been for 10 years. And I said, as a biographer, do you understand that I have no choice but to write about that? I don't really want to. It's going to be the least enjoyable chapter in this book for me to write. Writing about somebody's family issues is just, it's not fun. But it's necessary. It's 10 years of your life at that point, really more like 9.5. And if you want to have that debate, now the good news is for me, Aaron Rodgers is a very well-read person. He has read more biographies than probably almost anybody I know. But I said, if we need to debate that before we get started, or I start asking you questions about the estrangement, let's have that conversation. And he said, no, he goes, I get it. It wouldn't make any sense for you to write this book without including it. And I was like, okay, I appreciate the fact that he understood that, because there are star athletes I know who never would have understood that, who would have said, just write about my career. Why the hell do you have to write about my family?
It's not relevant or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the reason I'm relevant to you as an author is my career. So why do we have to get into this other stuff? So he didn't say that. He understood. I appreciated it. It's an unauthorized biography. He didn't owe me a damn thing. He didn't owe me an audience at the end of the process at his house. He had no editorial control. He was making no money off of this. Not that he needed the money, but certainly the kind I make, he doesn't need. And so no, but that is, he understood that. And I very much want to write a portrait or paint a portrait of a human being, not an athlete or a coach. And frankly, I do think before I'm done, I want to do a non-sports figure and attack it the same way, whether it's a political figure or a figure in entertainment, and really apply the same principles to that person as I do to coaches and superstar athletes.
Well, I think the thing that for me, your books make the most clear is that these, we look at athletes from the outside as fans, or at least I'll speak for myself. I do, as that they are there because they were given these gifts that normal people, don't get, whether it's, Aaron Rodgers, the size of his hands or the size of his feet, or, obviously his great, passing touch and all that. But there is so much more that goes into making them the legendary figures that they are. And at the beginning of the book, you forget starting with Rodgers' parents. You start a generation before that with his grandfather, who was a fighter pilot in World War II. And as you're weaving this narrative together, like the notion that, again, I'm not too far into it, but I'm far enough in it to realize that you couldn't tell the story of Aaron Rodgers, the football player, without telling the story of Aaron Rodgers and his family and where he came from. And I feel like, is that going to be a theme that continues throughout the rest of the book?
Yeah, I think so, because even he says that, yeah, I'm estranged from my parents right now, but without them, I'm not who I am. And he understands that as well. Like his family and his family's legacy means a lot to him and has shaped him in a lot of ways. And even his father, Aaron's father, said he believes, that the poise under pressure that his father as a combat pilot had is passed down through bloodlines. And you can't compare football to actual combat. I understand that. But it's interesting that we are basically the products of our environment and the products of our families and how they raised us and who they were as people. And so, yeah, and his grandfather on his father's side, that story had never been told. Occasionally in an article, you would see a passing reference to his grandfather being a World War II veteran or having been buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And that's when I heard that he was buried in Arlington National. I was like, well, he had to have been pretty damn good. as a combat pilot. So I needed to find out who was this person. So a lot of times, was it Branch Rickey who said luck is the residue of design? You have to get lucky as an author. I got lucky. I met a guy named Dan Matthews accidentally, who was a military records expert, lives in Minneapolis. And a lot of World War II records were destroyed in a fire many years ago, but he had access to records that weren't destroyed. And I found some myself, but he found a lot of them, documents that were classified, then unclassified, that really detailed all 44 missions that Aaron Rodgers flew in his B-24 against the Hitler war machine. And he was an amazing pilot. And the average lifespan of a combat pilot in World War II was less than half of that, 44 missions. He was shot down in number 44, but he had a mission on St. Patrick's Day, 1944, where his plane was on fire, bullet ridden. And he had to make a choice whether or not to order his 10 crewmen out in a parachute or try to fly that plane back to Italy on fire. And he got it back to Italy and the American base there and saved 11 lives, including his own. And there were other acts of valor. And I just decided that that story needed to be told. And I also wanted to open the book with a positive story about his family, because so much negative energy had surrounded it for the better part of a decade. And at the end of the day, I think Aaron really respected that and appreciated it to the extent where maybe that was the reason he decided to sit down with me when I was done with my interviews.
Yeah, it was fascinating to hear some of his quotes during that sit down. I have to ask one process question. You know, you talk about getting kind of lucky with that one interviewee. As you are going down this monumental road of writing a book of this nature, how do you know when to keep pulling on a thread, a particular thread, to try to see what comes of it? Is that just purely instinct, or like how do you evaluate that?
I think it's purely repetitions and doing this for a long time. It's almost, in terms of just being a writer professionally, it's almost 4 decades, 37, 38 years being an author. So this is my 6th book. And really, so I've been doing that for 20 plus years. And it's just a lot of reps, and you develop instinct through the repetition and going through it. When I wrote my first book, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was learning on the fly how to write a book, how to report it, how to research it, and how to market it. So, yeah, and I think just all the feature stories and enterprise stories and even columns I've reported out over the years, you just get a sense of, okay, there's something here. And once I started digging into like his grandfather's service, I could tell like this story has to be told. He was a POW. He was a writer. He actually worked at a couple of newspapers. I didn't know that. I don't even think Aaron knew that his father was a newspaper man back in the day. I'm sure he got a kick out of that. And that he used his writing skills to write plays for POWs to perform for German guards in exchange for favorable treatment. So, yeah, it was some amazing detail that we were able to uncover. And I got some people emails and on social media saying, well, they weren't that interested in his grandfather's story. Why did you open the book with a story that really had nothing to do with Aaron or his playing career? And I was like, hey, if you feel that way, I can't change the way you feel. And you have every right to your opinion, as I do. I just felt it was the right way to go about it. I was interested in it. And I think, Jonathan, when you have a chance to write about one of the greatest members of the greatest generation, you should take it. And that's what I did.
Yeah. And it's thrilling. Like the POW stuff was, I mean, it's astounding. That by itself is worth buying the book. I'm going to ask you, just one or two more about the book. Then we'll maybe get into some New York sports stuff, and a little Knicks. I was taken with the concept of luck as I'm reading this, and how it could work both ways. So you tell this great story about how part of the reason Aaron got a chance to quarterback at his high school is because the guy who was ahead of him, who may have been significant competition for the job, ended up transferring to a different school, and that kind of opened the door. And by the same token, he had this, bout of unluckiness where he goes to a school that does not have a reputation for producing big time athletes. They didn't have a big time, in terms of schedules against a lot of big opponents. His coach, you tell this great story about how the coach was a former running back and he wanted to run, didn't allow Aaron to really flash his stuff. And it's funny how this delicate balance of luck, like sometimes it goes against you, sometimes it goes for you, but it all seems to factor in the end product. Is that something you thought about as you were writing this, or had ever thought about before?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I think star athletes in sports, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, a lot of times it's where you're drafted and who your coach is and the system. And Tom Brady lucked out going 199th in the 2000 draft to the Patriots because he found a guy who he would help turn into the greatest NFL coach ever, a coach who would help him turn into the greatest NFL quarterback ever. And that system, and also being in a system where you had in Josh McDaniels, the best offensive coordinator in the league. And Aaron Rodgers didn't really have those things. Now, he lucked out in a sense by going to Green Bay. It's a great franchise to play for with a history of great quarterbacks, and it worked out for him. Yeah, he should have won more than one ring, but he won 4 MVPs. He got Super Bowl MVP when he got into the one big game. He was the best player in it. So his career worked out fine. But even being north of Sacramento, Division I recruiters did not go north of Sacramento. And he lived in Chico, which is, unfortunately, north of Sacramento. So, but he got lucky on the back end of that. No Division I offers whatsoever. There barely were any Division II or III offers. The local community college coach happened to live like 5 houses away. So I was over his house, Craig Rigsby, this total character. And he walked over. This is Aaron Rodgers' entire high school recruiting experience. The local community college coach walks over to his house, knocks on the door, sits down in the living room, and has to convince his mother, Aaron's mother, Darla Rodgers, that her son, who just got 1310 on the SATs and is a great quarterback, has to play at the local community college. So that was a tough conversation, but he sold it and it worked. And Craig Rigsby saved Aaron's football career. And he gave him a platform. And actually, they had an incumbent starter ready to take over. And the other coaches at Butte College wanted to start that kid because he'd been in the program like 3 years. And Rigsby said, no, this freshman is already better than that kid. And 5 games into the season, he's going to be 10 times better. So he starts Aaron. And then Berkeley accidentally sees Rodgers because they're interested in his tight end. And yeah, luck is a big part of it. And there are careers that are made by the fact that you got drafted by the right franchise or the wrong franchise.
Well, yeah.
And that could undo what would have been a great career. So I do think I'm a big believer in you make your luck. But that is certainly a part of the process in determining who has very successful professional sports careers and who does not.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes about that. Like the Knicks, we're all in la la land now because things are great, but for a long time the franchise was very bad. And I wonder about some of the kids that they drafted over that time who were talented players, and again the franchise was just not in a great place. Like would it have made a big difference? But with someone like Aaron Rodgers, you tell this great story about he's talking with his high school girlfriend on the eve of graduation, and again no Division I offers, and she asks him what are you going to do when you grow up? And he's like, I'm going to be a quarterback in the NFL, but believing it, like there's zero doubt. I'm wondering, having covered New York sports in particular, because I think there's something, maybe this is me selfishly saying this because I born and raised in New York, something even a little extra you need to succeed here. How much of it, when the Jeters you've covered, and obviously Rodgers, and like you go through Patrick Ewing, how much of it is the mental in addition to the physical gifts, where it's just guys or women who have this drive that there's nothing that is going to stand in their way from being successful?
Yeah, I think the mental in New York is a big part of it. And you look at Jeter, who then called a young Eli Manning and talked to him about doing it the right way, carrying yourself the way you are and continuing to do that. And Eli listening and never really making a public mistake. And also not letting the criticism get to you. Like Jeter, I think Jeter did care about criticism, and he was hurt by it, and he could carry a grudge too, but he never let the spotlight of New York ever rattle him, like in the postseason, which is the biggest moments in baseball. And he would make those moments small when he got in the batter's box. And until he won a championship, Alex Rodriguez did the opposite thing. He made it too big. And he had to learn really how to block out all of that. And Jeter was the master of that. And Eli Manning was very good at it too. And I think Jalen Brunson comes into the market. He's not drafted by the Knicks, but comes in where he still has a lot of years left. And I think because he grew up really as a coach's son, as a point guard son, as a guy who was a New York Knick and around those 90s Knicks. Yeah, I think a lot of that really helped Brunson as soon as he got here. Tim Bontemps, you know Tim, and you may have had him on your program, but
he's the one who. Yeah, we haven't had Tim. We've had Tim, the other Tim McMahon. We haven't had Bontemps on yet. Soon though, hopefully.
Okay, so he used to make fun of me because when I was at the Post, his old newspaper, as a columnist, every time I went to a Knicks game in Brunson's first year, I was just writing a column about Brunson every night. And he was teasing me about it. And I said, well, I could see something here. This just feels like it's going to be a perfect marriage. It really felt a little bit like Jeter and New York in 96 coming together. And I could see that Brunson just got it. And he was such a good, smart basketball player who just knew how to play. His footwork was just off the charts. And I could just see he was a great leader, and New York was just going to eat him up. So I just kept writing him. And Bontemps kept making fun of me. And then he stopped making fun of me once he realizes how good he was getting. And to the point now where he's on track to be a Hall of Famer. And yeah, I think, I don't want to say maybe the best guard the Knicks have ever had, because you're passing Clyde Frazier. But he has a shot. He's got a shot to do that. And I think that he is the one to end the drought. I don't know if it'll be this year, but I do think he'll do it. And he's the right guy to do it. He's the Jeter of the Knicks, and it could happen this year. If not, in the next 3-4 years, I would be surprised if he's not leading in the lead parade float in the Canyon of Heroes for the New York Knicks.
You've covered New York sports for so long. You've seen so many talented people come through this city and not succeed. And I think we could go, different people, there's different reasons for that. But with Brunson, how much of it do you think is what you just described and his makeup? And, it's kind of a Venn diagram here, but how much is it the fact that finally, after so many years, there is alignment between star player, head coach, president, and I mean, we could, Dolan, of course, he's in the news again, but at the very least, Dolan seems to have inherent full trust in the guy who's at the head, in Leon Rose. How much do you think that has to do with it, along with Brunson's unique personality and obviously his talent?
Yeah. And it's almost like one big happy family there with
almost literally. Yeah.
Yeah. Leon down to, when you think of all the connections, Leon to Tibbs to Brunson and Brunson's dad, and just, yeah. And the chemistry there is undeniable. And I think you need that alignment to be successful in the long haul. And I was critical of Leon Rose in a column in the New York Post simply because of his media policy and just the fact that he never makes himself available to the news media. I stand by that criticism. The Knicks were not happy about that. I told them it was coming, but of course they weren't happy about it. And early on, some of his moves I didn't like. I'll be honest, and I criticized him for a couple moves he made. And I think Tibbs, based on the sources I talked to, wasn't happy with a couple of moves that Leon Rose made. At the end of the day,
interesting.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the guy's done a great job, and so my criticism of him is really separate from his performance as a GM. It was just the way he handled the media, which in New York City, to never make yourself available to the people, the professionals who cover your team on a daily basis, I think is disrespectful to them and to the fan base. But I have to say, the guy has done an incredible job. And as a GM on the basketball side of it, which obviously is the most important thing. And so I wrote a column I think in his first year, for the post where I said the Heat were in town. And I said, when the Knicks are if the Knicks are to make a run at a championship, Leon Rose has to become like Pat Riley or better than Pat Riley. Pat Riley is a great assembler of talent and obviously winning the LeBron Derby. But throughout his career, Pat Riley got talent. He secured talent somehow, some way. And that's what Leon Rose has to do. And Leon did it. You could argue that he's doing it better than Riley is now. So I have zero problem saying that, despite my criticism of the way he handles the media. And I think that when you have a GM who's that good at his job, who's put together a roster like this, a coach who seems to be tailor-made for New York in terms of his toughness, and I'm not a big load management guy either, so I don't have a problem with Tibbs playing guys.
You're on the right podcast, Ian. Let me tell you that.
Yeah, it's funny because I had this conversation recently with Dan Hurley, who hates load management too, and seems to have done okay without it at UConn. But a star player and an excellent head coach and an excellent GM, and it really, Dolan really becomes a non-factor, and you have to give Dolan credit for hiring the right GM. Leon Rose has come in. And again, I don't like the way they handle the news media. It's like a separate issue. Fans aren't going to care, particularly when the Knicks are winning consistently. And they have a chance now in the next 2-3 years to win a championship. And I think they will. I do think the Knicks, their time is coming. It might have arrived this year. It's funny because when Denver won the championship, I don't know how you felt, Jonathan, but I felt like, these guys, the way they look, they're going to win 3 of the next 4 or 2 3 and win 3. And then they don't even make the finals this year. It's so hard to do it 2 years in a row, never mind 3, that the Celtics might have a drop off simply because it's so hard to do it. So there's an opportunity maybe for the Knicks to slide in there this year. They've improved with Bridges, and we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, one of the things I'm fascinated by with the NBA is the parity, maybe not from top to bottom of the league, because you still have a lot of bad teams, and you definitely still have a select, whether it's 5, 6, 7, whatever the number is, of teams that could actually win it. But you just look at how many different teams, if you take out the little blip of Kevin Durant going to the Warriors, and even they didn't win it every time because they succumbed to injury, but you have all these different teams that have won it, and a lot of these teams you look at, not that Vegas knows everything, but the odds going into a lot of these seasons, these teams are like 8-1, 9-1, 10-1 to win it all. It's not like we were so used to in the 80s and the 90s, and even if you want to go to the 2000s with some of those Laker teams, what I'm excited about, and you just mentioned Mikal Bridges, is they seem like they've given themselves a really nice runway here, where especially with all this apron stuff, like they should be able to keep this team together for a while. What I'm curious, because you mentioned Riley, especially when I first heard the news that they hired Leon Rose, I was say, okay, well, they're sticking with going for stars, and they diverted path to put together this team that they're seeming to bank on the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. Not that they don't have some very talented players, but this isn't like a traditional big 3 or something like that. Do you like that attempt to go for that? And do you think it's I mean, it sounds like you think it's going to work.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think it's a wings league now, and they've got a lot of really good wings who play both sides of the ball. And what I like is they're a likable team too. And I just like the players on this team right now. And I think New York City's really, really embraced the Knicks, and in part because of that, like the generosity of spirit that Brunson and Josh Hart have, and just a lot of guys on the team you can really feel like you can connect with and rally around. And one thing I'm concerned about, I love Anunoby's game, his two-way game, but I hope he's not one of these guys who just gets hurt. Just unlucky. You talked about luck before, having bad luck with injuries and them coming at the wrong time. And I really hope that's not the case, because I really like his game a lot, and I think he was a great acquisition. So, but they've got a lot of wings who are really good, and I think you need that to match up with the Celtics. And yeah, you can look at it. It's not a perfect roster. I'm not sure there is one in the NBA. They don't have a big who can go outside and shoot and maybe create some more room and driving lanes for the slashers and for Brunson to operate.
That'd be nice.
But again, nobody has a perfect roster. And I guess Randall's the interesting guy to watch. Do they keep him? Do they move him? He's a 24-9 guy, and there's a lot of value in that. And
well, can I ask you about that? Because with Julie, like, again, you've covered all these sports for so long in New York, and the reverberations when people are talking about something like a guy who's like, oh, everybody's talking, where is he going to get traded? Are they going to extend him? This and that. It reverberates. It seems like it reverberates at a different volume. Do you think that makes it harder on the players, or do you think it's a player by player thing, and it's just like some guys have the ability to tune it out and some guys don't? Like, how do you think they'll handle that? How do you think Randall will handle if his name does continue to get up as well? Is he going to be here long term?
Yeah, he's a human being, so it's definitely going to affect him. I just think if the two of us were constantly hearing our employers were thinking of, even if they're not, but it's out there, right? And it's like the employers can't control the rumors, even if they're not having conversations. And how would you feel about it? I wouldn't love it. And so I don't blame him for feeling a certain way about it. I will say this, a few years ago and coming out of the pandemic, I just felt that Randall was a guy who should never have to buy a meal or a drink in this town ever again for what he did for New York, leading that team and just being in that building again with a full house of people coming right out of the depths of the pandemic. It was such a good feeling, and that team meant so much to the city, and he led that team, that I want good things to happen for him. And so I hope it's to stay a Knick and be part of this championship run. I think he's a really good player, and I think that he realizes, listen, to be the second or even third best player on a team, the team that ends the drought in New York, you're going to be lionized for life. You don't have to be the best player. I mean, if Dave DeBusschere were still around, he could probably have a conversation with him about that. He was not the best player or the second best player on that team that captured the imagination of New York. And there's still a romantic tie with New York and the 70s Knicks that won too. And so Julius Randle as the second or third best player on the team that ends the drought, that's a good deal. That's not a bad thing. So I think he understands that. If he doesn't, somebody close to him needs to explain that to him, that don't worry about it. This is clearly now Jalen Brunson's team. It doesn't have to be your team. If you win a championship, nobody's going to care. And as long as you're part of it and you're contributing, and he'll be one of the best guys on the team just through the natural force of his talent. And you don't have to be the best guy in a championship team. You just have to win. You just have to win one ring in New York. That's all we ask. And you will be lionized forever. And I do think he can be a part of that. Because I feel like this is maybe truer in basketball than other sports, but maybe you disagree. When you get that certain level of buy-in where you could tell, even, covering a team that like, oh, they're locked in, they're on a mission. Is that something that, again, kind of like, when you see it, do you get that sense as you're covering a team? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You could feel the chemistry, and if you're covering it on a somewhat regular basis, without question. And you see something like, and obviously Tom Brady did this with the Patriots, times took a little less money. And Brunson, although it may pay off for him financially down the road, what he did, being smart enough to realize that I've got such a wonderful thing going here. Let me do the smart thing with my contract for now. And again, I may make that money back and then some later anyway. But it's just when your best player is doing little things and not so little things like that, and also saying the right things all the time. It's a 24/7 thing for him. You can tell he just carries himself the right way. He's the Jeter of the Knicks. And that's why he's the right guy, I think. And seeing all the guys, and I wanted Patrick Ewing to win a ring. I saw the work he put into it firsthand. And unfortunately, he didn't have Scottie Pippen, and Michael Jordan did. And his second best player was just never good enough. They were good players, but just not good enough to get over the hump. So Ewing ends up without a ring. And I think that the Knicks doing it almost the way those old Detroit Pistons did it with Larry Brown, right? And I'm trying to think of a team in between that didn't have a traditional superstar big two or big three combination because the Knicks don't. And their superstar is unconventional.
Yeah, one team one of our listeners, Alex, brings up to me a lot is the older version of the Pistons, the late 80s Pistons with Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars and that team. That's another one that, again, it didn't have Jordan or Bird or Magic, but they managed to pull up back to back.
Yeah, I think Isaiah is, to me, the best little guy, even though he's not that little. What's Isaiah? So he was 6'2", and he was probably really more like 6'1". But I think of him as the best little man I've ever seen. Now, Steph Curry, do you count him as a little guy? Because I would say then Curry would be, it depends where you have the cutoff. But I think that, frankly, Brunson is entering Isaiah territory the way he's playing. Oof. And no, I think he's a Hall of Famer, and I think he's a first ballot guy, and I think he's good enough to. Isaiah won 2 rings. I could see Brunson winning 2. Obviously, we'll settle for 1 because it's been a long time since 1973, right? So
just 1 is enough. I'll take 1. I'll happily. Where can I sign for 1?
Yeah, I think actually either of those Pistons teams, the Larry Brown Pistons, are going back to the Chuck Daly Pistons, and how they did it was not really traditional. You're right. So I think those are good comps. But I do think the way the Knicks are put together now, I think, and given what I said earlier, that it's so hard to go back to back, and the Nuggets prove that, not even getting to the finals. I'm not saying the Celtics won't win again, but it's going to be tougher even the second time around. And so I do think there's opportunity. And frankly, if you told me the Knicks could have Paul George or Bridges before those moves were made, I would have picked Bridges. He's 6 years younger, and George is the better player when you look at it. But I think Bridges was the better fit, and so I would have done what the Knicks did.
I'm happy with the moves. To bring it back to Aaron Rodgers, you said it earlier in this podcast. Rodgers, if you look at the stats, if you look at the individual accolades, just the eye test, watching him Sunday after Sunday for all these years, there's an argument, right? In a different universe, maybe, that this is the greatest quarterback who ever lived, and yet only 1 Super Bowl. Now, 1 Super Bowl is more than a lot of other guys have won. And, you talk about like Ewing never got one, and yeah, the Knicks could win it this year. Maybe they can't. The same thing next year. You never know how things are going to break. And I think that, that's what makes sports exciting, not to get, all wishy-washy. I'm going to end with this, to bring it back to Aaron. Do you think there's a happy ending for him and the Jets? And I know there's a lot of Jet fans out there who are hoping even after the first loss of the season.
I actually liked the way he threw the ball against the 49ers, and I felt that he just never had the ball. It was like the time possession was a joke. It was like the defense couldn't get off the field. Plus he had, I really think this is going to sound crazy, but Lazard, who had a good game, but he drops that first 3rd down throw on the first drive. Who knows? If he makes that catch, they get a first down, they get some momentum. Maybe they go down, kick a field goal, or even score a touchdown. It could have changed the nature of the game. They weren't going to win that game, but it just would have created a different feel. You never know. And then Breece Hall with the early fumble, and the defense can't get off the field. I just think it was hard for Rodgers to ever get into a rhythm. That one drive, he looked great. The touchdown throw, of course, he's the master of drawing the defense off sides, having the free play, throwing a touchdown pass. He's done that more than anybody. But I really want it for Jets fans. They've been through so much, and their drought, of course, as we said earlier, is bigger than the Knicks fans' drought. And so I think they'll be an 11-6 team this year. I'm not in love with the head coach. I think most Jets fans would have the same sentiment, but I think they can win the division, go 11-6. They're not going to win the AFC Championship game at Kansas City. So if somebody can pick off the Chiefs, maybe they'd have an outside shot to get to the Super Bowl. I think that's the best case scenario for sure. You
think this is it for Aaron after this year?
No, I think he's going to play next year as long as he has a good year this year. He wants to play another year for the Jets. He said he wants to give them 2 good years. Obviously, last year didn't count. That was a complete unmitigated disaster. So as long as he plays at a fairly high level this year, I think he's back. Now, if they miss the playoffs and Woody Johnson fires everybody, I'm not sure what that means for Rodgers. Woody does like having a star power at the quarterback position, so he might actually keep him around for the next coach. But for Saleh to be back, I think they have to make the playoffs or at least go 9-8, have a winning record. But I think Rodgers is back next year, pretty much one way or the other.
Before I wave you goodbye, I do have to call up noted Jet fan, my producer, Andrew Claudio, who I think maybe has something very quick for you.
Ian, that was an outstanding conversation that you just had with John. I'm behind him as far as progress into the book. I cannot wait to dive in deeper, especially with how much I've enjoyed your work over the years. The answer you just gave to you're welcome. I meant every word to everybody. Go get the book. Where is it?
Please go get the book. Yes.
It's available. The link is in the description. Go get it now. If you're a New York football fan, you might have some time on your hands before Knicks basketball comes around. The answer to the question you just gave to John about whether it'd be a happy ending, that was very well thought out and a good analysis. A very simpler one would have just been no, it will not have a happy ending, which is also probably the right answer.
Well, listen, I appreciate your fatalism, and Jets fans are the most fatalistic fans I've ever met. But I will say this. In 2004, I was there when the Red Sox did it. They were a haunted franchise, and everything went wrong finally for everybody else except them, including the team, the franchise that had conquered them so many times, the Yankees. The 94 Rangers, 54-year drought. The 2016 Cubs, it had been forever. So we've seen, or at least I'm old enough to have seen, haunted franchises, multiple ones, finally break through, kick down the door. So I do think that it will happen for the Knicks and the Jets. And part of it is I want to see it happen. I do remember the Knicks 73 team. I was 8 years old. I do remember that. I don't remember the Jets in Super Bowl III because I was 4. So I just turned 60. So before I'm gone, I do want to see both of those franchises win the whole thing. I'll take either. I don't care what order it's in, though I have a book out now on Aaron Rodgers. I think I'd prefer the Jets to go first if I had to make a choice. But no, I would love to see the Knicks win it all as well.
Truly, like, for me, there's nothing better than a great sports book. And all you do is pump out great sports books. And this is the latest one. If you're listening to this, you don't have to be a sports fan to love what you write, because you tell these stories in such a way where it's just, again, it's about, if you're a human being and you've lived with other people around you, you're going to appreciate this stuff. Amazing stuff. Thank you so much for coming on. Again, the name of the book is Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. You can get it anywhere books are sold. You could obviously order it. And we're, as we always do, we will include the link if you would like to order the book online. We will include a link in the description of this episode so you could go and click that. I always ask everybody before they leave, anything we should keep an eye out for you? I mean, obviously you got the book. Anything else that you want people to keep an eye on?
I got to figure out my next book. And no, I appreciate anyone who wants it. It's on Amazon.com, obviously bookstores. The link you'll provide, which is a very nice thing for you to do. You didn't have to do that.
Of course.
And no, it's a great show you guys have, Jonathan, and I'm a big fan of your work. And yeah, so let's have a couple of New York championships. We're overdue, right? It's been a while since that Giants second Coughlin-Eli Super Bowl. So yeah, that'll be fun if it unfolds that way.
Your lips to God's ears, Ian. Ian O'Connor, everybody.